I didn't plan on being home that weekend. My leave request had been sitting in my inbox for days, and I was close to letting it expire. But my father's message was short and unusually formal. Family gathering. Important. Please be there. That tone was enough. After 17 years in the U.S. Navy, I'd learned to recognize it. Decisions had already been made. My presence wasn't optional. I pulled into the driveway just after 7. Same white siding, same trimmed hedges my father never let anyone touch. From the outside, nothing had changed. From the inside, I already knew better. Things always change when you're gone long enough. Rachel was the first one I saw. My sister stood near the entryway, glass of wine in hand, perfectly relaxed. She smiled when she spotted me, that practice smile she used when company was watching. "Natalie," she said, "you made good time." We hugged, brief. She smelled like expensive perfume and red wine. The house was full, relatives, business associates, neighbors who liked to pretend they weren't there for the gossip. This wasn't just a family party. It was a celebration. A deal my father had been negotiating for months was finally closed. Rachel had organized everything. She always did. She guided me toward the kitchen, already talking. About the company. About how stressful things had been. About how good it was that I'd finally taken time off. She poured me a glass of wine herself, dark red, steady hand. "You deserve a drink," she said, passing it to me. "You always forget to slow down." I took it without thinking. Habit. Trust. Muscle memory from a life where you don't expect threats at home. Before I could lift the glass, someone brushed past me. The wine sloshed, spilling over my fingers and onto the rug. Oh no, I'm so sorry," Elena said, already kneeling with a cloth. Elena Morales had worked for my family for over a decade. Quiet, efficient, nearly invisible unless something needed fixing. Her hands were shaking as she wiped the spill, but her voice stayed calm. Too calm. As she leaned closer, her shoulder blocking Rachel's view for just a second longer than necessary, her lips barely moved. "Don't drink it," she whispered. "Please. Just trust me." I didn't react. Not because I hadn't heard her, because I had. Years of training teach you how to hold your face still when something doesn't add up. You don't flinch. You don't ask questions out loud. You collect data and wait. Rachel turned sharply. "Elena, be careful." "I will," Elena said quickly. "I promise." She stood and disappeared down the hall, leaving the room quieter than it had been a moment earlier. Rachel sighed, rolling her eyes. "She's been so clumsy lately. I don't know what's gotten into her." I smiled neutral and set the glass down. "It's fine. Accidents happen." She hesitated, then picked up her own glass. "I can get you another one." "No need," I said. "I'll just grab something later." She watched me for half a second too long before nodding. The evening settled into its rhythm. Conversations overlapped. Laughter rose and fell. My father moved from group to group, energized for the first time in weeks. Rachel stayed close, always within reach. Always aware of where I was. About 20 minutes later, the front door opened again. Claire Whitman walked in, slightly out of breath, coat still on. My cousin had flown in late and missed the early part of the party. "Sorry," she said, smiling. "Traffic was brutal." She scanned the room, then reached for the nearest glass on the side table. The one I'd set down. "Finally," she said, taking a long sip. I needed that. No one stopped her. There was no reason to. Less than 5 minutes later, Claire dropped the glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound cut straight through the room. She grabbed the edge of the table, blinking hard. "I feel weird." Her knees buckled. She went down fast. The room erupted. Someone shouted her name. Chairs scraped back. My father rushed forward, panic written across his face. I stayed where I was. Claire's hands curled in on themselves, fingers twitching like they didn't belong to her. Her breathing went shallow and uneven. Her skin went pale in a way that had nothing to do with fainting. Rachel dropped to her knees beside her. "Call 911, she shouted. "Now!" Someone already was. I watched. I counted. Breaths. Seconds between muscle spasms. The way Claire's eyes struggled to focus. Elena reappeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, but her eyes went straight to me. No surprise, no confusion, just confirmation. Sirens cut through the noise before anyone could ask the right questions. Paramedics moved fast, efficient, professional. They asked about allergies, medications, medical history. Nothing like this, my father said. His voice shook. Claire tried to speak. The words came out thick and slurred. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, her head turned toward me. Her eyes sharpened for just a second, confused, almost accusing. Then she was gone. The house smelled like spilled wine and disinfectant wipes. Conversations resumed in whispers. People avoided looking at each other. Rachel stood smoothing her dress, already shifting into control mode. "We'll head to the hospital," she said. "Everyone else, please give us some space." Her eyes flicked to the side table, to the empty spot where the glass had been. I didn't move towards it, not yet. If that moment made you uneasy, good. Drop a comment and tell me what you think was really in that glass, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. At the hospital, everything blurred into white walls and clipped questions. Claire was stable, they said, but they were running tests. The word reaction floated around vague and unhelpful. Rachel paced. My father sat with his head in his hands. Elena sat rigid in a plastic chair, hands folded tight in her lap. A doctor pulled me aside. Did she eat or drink anything unusual before collapsing? I thought about the glass, about Elena's whisper, about Rachel's steady hand when she poured. We were at a family party, I said. There was wine. He nodded. We'll include a toxicology screen. Please do, I said. He studied me for a moment. You're handling this very calmly. I'm trained to, I replied. That doesn't mean I like it. When he walked away, Elena leaned toward me, lowering her voice. She drank the whole glass, she said. Rachel never does. That was new information. I filed it away along with everything else. The timing, the hesitation, the spill that shouldn't have mattered but did. My phone buzzed with a routine check-in from base. I ignored it. 5 minutes. That was all it took for Claire to collapse. And whatever had been in that glass had already done its job, just not on the person it was meant for. I kept my hands still on my knees while the monitor above Claire's bed beeped at a steady, indifferent pace. The sound didn't match the scene in my head. 5 minutes. That was all it took for her to go down. People don't just drop like that from stress or bad timing. Not like that. A nurse adjusted the IV and stepped away. Claire's color was better now, but her face still looked unfamiliar, like her muscles hadn't agreed yet on what normal was supposed to feel like. My father stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed tight against his chest, staring at the floor as if it had personally failed him. Rachel hovered near the doorway, phone pressed to her ear. She spoke in a low voice, calm, efficient. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the tone. Damage control. I shifted my weight in the chair and felt it again, that faint hollow lightness behind my eyes. Not dizziness exactly. More like my head lagging half a second behind my thoughts. I'd felt it before, dozens of times. I'd just never connected it to anything concrete. I rolled my shoulders once, testing myself. No weakness, no shaking. Still the sensation stayed. A doctor came in mid-40s, tired but focused. She's stable, he said. We're running blood work and imaging. We want to rule out seizure activity or a stroke. Any signs pointing one way or the other, I asked. He hesitated. Not yet. Rachel turned from his doorway. This is probably dehydration, she said quickly. Claire barely eats when she travels. The doctor nodded non-committal and stepped out. Rachel exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an audience. She walked over and touched my arm. You okay? I looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. I'm fine. She studied me for a second too long. You didn't drink much tonight. I wasn't thirsty. Another pause. She smiled, thin and controlled. Of course. She moved away and sat beside our father, immediately pulling him into a quiet conversation about logistics. Who would call whom, what to tell people, what not to say yet. I leaned back in my chair and let my eyes drift to the ceiling, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to look at either of them while my brain sorted through something it had been avoiding for months. The first time I'd felt off was late winter. I'd woken up nauseous in a hotel room and blamed bad takeout. A week later, it happened again. Light-headed mornings, a dull pressure behind my eyes, trouble focusing during briefings. I chalked it up to travel and sleep deprivation. My primary care doctor agreed. Stress, dehydration, Maybe acid reflux. Drink more water. Cut back on caffeine. Rachel had driven me to that appointment. She'd insisted, actually. Said she wanted to make sure I didn't brush anything off the way I always did. She sat in the room, smiling, joking with the doctor about how I never knew when to slow down. She's always been like that, she'd said. Even before the Navy. At the time, I thought she sounded proud. After that, she'd started paying closer attention when I visited. Vitamins lined up on the counter. Tea already brewed. Coffee poured before I asked. She framed it as concern. Sisterly care, making up for lost time. I'd accepted it without question. Family habits are hard to interrogate. A chair scraped softly across the floor. Elena had moved closer, standing just inside the room now, hands folded in front of her. She didn't look at Claire. She looked at me. I stood and stepped into the hallway, not bothering to ask anyone. Elena followed without a word. We stopped near a window overlooking the parking lot. The night air pressed cold against the glass, grounding in a way the hospital never was. "You've noticed," I said quietly. She didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes." "How long?" She swallowed. "Months." I let that settle before asking the next question. "Tonight." Her jaw tightened. Tonight was different. "How?" She didn't measure, Elena said. She just poured. That single sentence rearranged everything. Measure what I asked. Elena shook her head. I never saw the bottle clearly. Small glass. Sometimes in her purse. Sometimes in the drawer by the sink. She used to count. Always. Count drops. Yes. I didn't ask why she hadn't said anything sooner. I already knew the answer. Fear has a way of making people quiet instead of dramatic. She reminded me, "Who signs my checks?" Elena added almost apologetically. "That tracks," I said. A nurse called Claire's name from inside the room. My father stepped forward immediately. Rachel followed. Elena took a step back, fading into the background like she always did. I stayed where I was. The hallway felt longer than it should have. My pulse stayed steady. My hands didn't shake. That almost bothered me more than panic would have. My phone buzzed. A message from my unit. Routine check-in. I ignored it and slid the phone back into my pocket. The doctor came out again, a few minutes later, his expression more serious this time. "Miss Brooks," he said, looking directly at me. "Can I speak with you?" We stepped aside. "We're seeing some irregularities in her blood work," he said. "It's early, but there are indicators that suggest possible toxic exposure." "What kind?" I asked. "We need to run a more specific panel to be sure." "Run it," I said. "Whatever you need." He studied my face, then nodded. "We will." When I walked back toward the waiting area, Rachel was already watching me. "What did he say?" she asked. "That they don't know yet," I replied. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. I glanced down at my hands again. Still steady. Still under control. 5 minutes. That was the window. Whatever had been in that wine acted fast. Fast enough that it didn't care who drank it as long as someone did. Claire was moved to observation. No visitors for now. My father argued briefly, then gave up. He looked smaller when he sat back down, like the confidence he'd carried all evening had finally run out. Rachel sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Comforting, familiar. Elena remained standing near the wall, eyes down, posture tight. I sat and let the room exist around me, without participating in it. The TV murmured about something irrelevant. Phones buzzed, people whispered. Once you notice that something is wrong, your brain stops being polite about it. It drags every ignored detail back into the open and lines them up without asking permission. The mornings I'd felt sick. The afternoons when my focus slipped just enough to be noticeable. The way Rachel always insisted on handling my drinks when I visited. The way Elena hovered nearby, wiping counters that were already clean. I hadn't wanted to see it. That didn't mean it hadn't been there. My father leaned toward me. "She's under a lot of pressure," he said quietly. "This deal, the company, pressure doesn't cause muscle spasms," I replied. He flinched. Across the room, Elena caught my eye and tapped her wrist twice. A small gesture. Time. I stood. "I'm going to get some water." Rachel nodded absently already back on her phone. At the fountain, I filled a paper cup and took a slow sip. It tasted like nothing. Normal. Safe. That was when the realization finally locked into place, cold and precise. Whatever had been happening to me hadn't started tonight. Tonight was just the first time someone else took the hit. I didn't sit back down after the water fountain. I stayed on my feet and let the cold from the cup settle into my palms while I watched Rachel from across the waiting area. She was calm, too calm. Her voice stayed low as she spoke into her phone, nodding like she was checking boxes off a list. Anyone watching would have seen a competent daughter handling a crisis. What I saw was timing. Every call made in the right order, every reaction measured. Elena moved closer to the vending machines, pretending to read the labels like she hadn't seen them 100 times before. When Rachel turned away, Elena shifted just enough to catch my attention. I walked over without looking at her. She drank the whole glass, Elena said quietly, eyes still on the machine. Rachel never does. How do you know that? I asked. She takes one sip. Maybe two. She likes to hold it. Tonight, she didn't even touch it. That detail slid into place with the others. Rachel had handed me the wine, then stepped back. She hadn't raised it to her lips. She hadn't needed to. Did Claire finish it? I asked. Yes, Elena said. All of it. I nodded once. You've been watching her. Elena's shoulders tensed. I watch everything in that house. Why? She finally looked at me. Because I was scared. That answer mattered more than anything else she could have said. We stood there in silence, while a nurse walked past us, pushing a cart loaded with supplies. The hospital kept moving. None of it slowed down for personal revelations. Tell me exactly what you've seen, I said. Elena took a breath. She started paying more attention to you after your visit in the spring. She said you looked tired, said the Navy was wearing you down. I remembered that weekend. A quick stop between flights. I'd slept badly and woken up nauseous, blamed jet lag. Rachel had insisted on making breakfast. Coffee already poured, cream added the way I liked it. Did you see her put anything in my drinks? I asked. Elena hesitated, not at first. And later, yes. My pulse picked up, but my voice didn't. What did she use? A small bottle, Elena said. Glass, clear liquid, no label. Sometimes she kept it in her purse, sometimes in the drawer by the sink. How many drops? At first one, she said, then two, later three. She counted every time. And tonight, she didn't count, Elena said again. She poured. That distinction mattered. Counting meant control. Pouring meant urgency. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I asked. Elena's jaw tightened. Because I wasn't sure, and because she reminded me who signs my checks. Fear doesn't make people sloppy. It makes them precise. Elena had been quiet not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much. A nurse stepped into the waiting area and called my father's name. He stood immediately, Rachel already rising beside him. Elena took a step back, disappearing into her usual role. I didn't follow them. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through old messages, looking for patterns I'd ignored. Texts from Rachel checking in on my health. Reminders to take vitamins. Jokes about me working too hard. They read differently now. A few minutes later, the doctor returned this time, accompanied by another physician. They spoke quietly with my father, and Rachel, heads bent together. Rachel's posture shifted just slightly, her shoulders tightening. When they finished, my father came toward me. They're expanding the tests, he said, just to be safe. Good, I replied. Rachel smiled, relief carefully placed. See? Probably nothing serious. I didn't answer. The second doctor lingered. Miss Brooks, he said, we'd like to ask you a few questions. We stepped aside again. Have you experienced any symptoms recently? He asked. Dizziness, nausea, trouble concentrating? Yes, I said. On and off for months. Rachel's head snapped up. Why didn't you say anything? I did, I replied. I went to my doctor. The physician nodded. Did anyone else notice these symptoms? I glanced toward Elena, then back at him. Someone did. Rachel laughed softly, waving a hand. She worries too much. The doctor didn't laugh. He made a note on his tablet. We're adding heavy metals to the panel, he said, just to rule things out. Rachel's smile tightened. When he walked away, she turned to me. You're being dramatic. Am I? I asked. My father looked between us, confused and tired. Can we not do this here? We're not doing anything, Rachel said quickly. Natalie's just stressed. I studied her face, the familiar angles, the expressions I'd known my entire life. She looked exactly like someone who thought she was still ahead. I stepped back toward Elena. If anyone asks you questions, I said quietly, you tell the truth. Her eyes widened. She'll know. I know, I said. That's fine. The waiting room felt smaller now, like the walls had shifted inward. Every sound seemed sharper. Every movement deliberate. Claire was moved to a private room. She was conscious, but disoriented. Her words slow and uneven. When I stepped close enough for her to see me clearly, her brow furrowed. I feel like I messed something up, she said. You didn't, I replied. You just showed us something. She blinked confused, then drifted back into sleep. Rachel stayed by the door, arms crossed watching. Not worried, calculating. Elena stood near the foot of the bed, hands folded, eyes never leaving Claire's face. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for confirmation that she'd done the right thing. Outside the room, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my unit commander. Everything okay? He asked. Family situation, I said. I might need a day. He paused. You sound focused. I am. Call me if you need anything, he said. And don't do anything stupid. I won't, I replied. That was mostly true. When I hung up, I didn't feel panic or anger. I felt clarity. The kind that comes when enough variables line up and the picture stops being blurry. Whatever Rachel had been doing wasn't new. Tonight wasn't a mistake. It was a deviation. She'd rushed, she'd poured instead of counting, and someone else had paid for it. I looked at my sister one more time, standing there in the hospital hallway, perfectly composed. She thought she was managing a crisis. What she didn't realize was that the situation had already shifted out of her control. I stayed standing when the nurse pulled the curtain halfway closed, leaving just enough space for the hallway noise to bleed in. Claire's eyes were open now, unfocused, but alert enough to track movement. A heart monitor ticked steadily beside her. The room smelled like antiseptic and something faintly metallic that didn't belong there. The doctor stepped in with a tablet tucked under his arm. He didn't look rushed. That worried me more than urgency would have. We're still waiting on a few results, he said, glancing between Claire and the screen. But some of the early markers are unusual. Unusual how I asked. He chose his words carefully. They don't line up with dehydration or anxiety, and they don't look like a typical seizure disorder. Rachel shifted her weight near the door. So what are you saying? I'm saying we're expanding the toxicology screen, he replied. This looks more like an exposure than an internal event. My father frowned. Exposure to what? That's what we're trying to determine, the doctor said. Metals, certain compounds. We'll know more once the panel comes back. Rachel laughed lightly, the sound sharp in the small room. This is getting ridiculous. Are you seriously suggesting someone poisoned her? The doctor didn't react. I'm suggesting we rule out all possibilities. He left without waiting for permission. Claire stirred her fingers, twitching against the blanket. Why does my mouth taste like pennies? She asked. No one answered her right away. The nurse adjusted the IV and smiled reassuringly. That can happen after an episode. Try to relax. Claire nodded weakly, then looked at me. Did I embarrass myself? No, I said. You just showed up at the wrong time. She frowned, not understanding, and let her eyes close again. Outside the room, Rachel crossed her arms. This is spiraling, she said. We should slow things down. Slow what down, I asked. All of it, she said. The tests, the speculation. People talk. I looked at her. People collapse too. My father rubbed his face. Can we take this outside? We stepped into an empty consultation room down the hall. Rachel shut the door behind us, deliberate. This doesn't make sense, she said, pacing. Claire barely eats. She flew all day. Anyone could have had a reaction. You didn't, I said. She stopped. What? You didn't drink, I repeated. Not once. She stared at me, like I'd accused her of something absurd. So you handed me the glass, I said, then stepped back. That's nothing. It's something, I replied. Because Elena said you never drink what you pour. Rachel scoffed. Elena's dramatic. Elena doesn't talk, I said. That's the point. My father looked between us unsettled. Natalie. What are you implying? I'm implying that Claire drank something that wasn't meant for her, I said. Silence stretched. Rachel broke it with a sharp laugh. You're really going to do this? Accuse your own sister because a maid whispered something to you. I didn't raise my voice. I'm going to pay attention. The door opened before she could respond. The doctor was back this time with a more serious expression. We have preliminary results, he said. Nothing conclusive yet, but there are elevated markers that suggest exposure to a toxic substance. My father's face drained of color. Toxic. Yes, the doctor said. Low-dose exposure, possibly cumulative. Rachel stepped forward. This is insane. The doctor met her eyes. What would be insane is ignoring it. He turned to me. You mentioned symptoms earlier. Fatigue, dizziness. Yes. How long? Months. Rachel shook her head. You're overworked. That's all. The doctor typed something into his tablet. We'll need to test you as well. Rachel froze. Yes, he said. If there's a pattern, we need a comparison. My father nodded slowly. Do it. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. A nurse came to draw blood. I rolled up my sleeve without comment. The needle prick was familiar. I watched the vial fill dark and steady. Any other unusual symptoms, the nurse asked. Brain fog, I said. Occasional nausea. She nodded, making a note. Rachel watched the entire process, jaw tight, eyes sharp. She wasn't worried about my health. She was calculating timelines. When the nurse left, Rachel turned to me. You're enjoying this? No, I said. I'm surviving it. She leaned closer. You think this makes you smarter than me? I think it makes me careful, I replied. The doctor cleared his throat. We're moving Claire to observation overnight. No visitors for now. Rachel exhaled loudly. Finally some sense. He looked at her. This isn't about convenience. After he left, my father sagged into a chair. I don't understand how this could happen. It didn't happen, I said. It was done. He flinched. That's a serious thing to say. So is toxic exposure, I replied. Rachel turned away, pulling out her phone. I'm calling the lawyer. For what my father asked. For everything she said, already dialing. Elena stood a few feet away, still and silent. When Rachel moved down the hall, Elena stepped closer to me. She didn't touch the glass, Elena said quietly. Not once. I know. She never does, Elena added. That's how I knew. How long did she plan it? I asked. Elena swallowed. Long enough to be confident. The answer settled heavily in my chest. My phone buzzed with a secure message from base. I glanced at it, then put the phone back in my pocket. There were procedures for situations like this. Reporting channels, documentation. I'd avoided using them for personal matters my entire career. Avoidance didn't equal safety. I walked back to Claire's room one last time before they moved her. She was half asleep, her breathing even. You're going to be okay, I said quietly. She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened slightly around the blanket. Outside, Rachel's voice echoed faintly down the hall, controlled and confident, as she spoke to someone on the other end of the line. I stood there listening and made a decision I'd been circling since the moment the glass shattered on the floor. Whatever Rachel had set in motion didn't stop with Claire collapsing, and it wasn't going to be handled quietly just because she wanted it that way. I didn't follow Rachel down the hallway or wait for my father to finish another round of worried phone calls. I walked straight out of the hospital and into the cold night air, letting the decision settle in my chest as something firm instead of emotional. Elena came after me without being asked. We didn't talk in this HAR. There was nothing to clarify. She gave directions automatically, the way people do when they've already rehearsed what happens next. The house looked exactly the same. When we pulled into the driveway, lights on curtains drawn, the kind of calm that assumes no one is paying attention. Elena unlocked the door, then paused, hand still on the knob. She might notice. I hope she does, I said. Inside the house smelled faintly of wine and cleaning spray. Someone had already tried to erase the evening. Empty glasses sat in the dishwasher neatly arranged. Surfaces were wiped down too carefully. Rachel liked order. She liked things to look finished. We don't touch anything we don't need to, I said. We document first. Elena nodded and pulled a pair of gloves from under the sink, snapping them on with a practiced motion. She'd done this kind of quiet work before, just not like this. We started in the kitchen. Not because it felt dramatic, but because routines live there. Patterns get lazy where people think no one is watching. Elena moved with purpose, opening drawers and cabinets she'd cleaned 1,000 times before. She didn't search randomly. She went straight to the places Rachel thought were invisible. She started bringing things home from the office, Elena said. Vitamins, supplements. Said they helped with focus. I scanned the counter. Bottles lined up neatly, labels facing forward. Too neat. I picked one up, reading the ingredients. Nothing alarming on the surface. Did you ever taste anything, I asked? No, Elena said. I don't drink what I prepare unless I'm asked. That's a rule. A good one, as it turned out. She knelt and pulled open the drawer by the sink. Everything inside was organized cloth napkins, stacked utensils aligned. She reached behind the napkins and froze. That's it, she said. She stepped back and let me see. A small glass vial sat tucked against the back of the drawer. Clear liquid. No label, no smell. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. I took photos first. The drawer. The vial in place. The napkins covering it. Then I sealed it in a plastic bag. How often did she use it, I asked. At first, only when you visited, Elena said. Later, more often. How many drops? 1 at first, then 2, sometimes 3. And tonight, she didn't count, Elena said again. She poured. We moved to the pantry next. Elena reached behind a stack of cleaning supplies and pulled out a small notebook, worn and soft at the edges. I didn't write everything at first, she said. Just dates. She handed it to me. The handwriting was neat. Careful. No emotion. Just facts. Dates I'd visited. Days I'd felt sick. Notes like coffee prepared by Rachel and Natalie, dizzy by noon. The timeline lined up too well to be coincidence. You kept this, I said. I didn't know what else to do, Elena replied. I kept thinking she'd stop. She didn't, I said. No, Elena agreed. We moved through the rest of the house without rushing. The living room, the study. Rachel's desk stacked with financial documents and folders labeled in her precise handwriting. She worked late often, Elena said. Said she was protecting the company. I powered on the computer monitor. Password protected. Of course it was. Did she ever talk about me, I asked. Elena hesitated. She said you were a problem. That didn't surprise me. She said you came back too often. Elena continued. That you made your father doubt things. That if you stayed gone, everything would be easier. I nodded once. That explained more than she probably realized. And you, I asked. She said I asked too many questions, Elena said. That people like me should know their place. People like me! The phrase hung in the air, familiar and ugly. We heard a car pull into the driveway. Elena stiffened. I held up a hand and moved quietly to the door. 2 men stood outside, plain clothes, calm posture. Professionals. I opened the door before they knocked. Miss Brooks, one of them said. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Come in, I replied. They scanned the room without making it obvious. One of them noticed the bag with the vial immediately. Elena sat at the table and placed the notebook in front of her before they asked. That told me everything I needed to know about her resolve. I kept notes, she said. I can show you. The officers exchanged a glance. One took the vial carefully and sealed it. The other photographed the drawer where we'd found it. This helps, he said. I know, Elena replied. They asked about routines, access. Who was home when? I answered where I could. Elena filled in the rest. She didn't embellish. She didn't panic. She stuck to what she'd seen. When they finished, one of the officers looked at me. We'll be in touch. I'll be available, I said. After they left, the house felt less heavy. Not safe, just exposed. Elena sank into a chair. I thought they'd arrest me. They won't, I said. You documented. You warned. You didn't benefit. She nodded slowly, breathing out. I don't know what happens now, she said. Neither do I replied. But you won't be alone. She looked at me, really looked, and something in her expression softened. I knew you'd believe me. Belief hadn't been the hard part. Acting had. I glanced toward the hallway, then back at the kitchen, where a glass of wine had once seemed harmless. Rachel hadn't panicked when Claire collapsed. She'd moved on instinct, confident the situation was still manageable. She was wrong. I took one last photo of the counter and slid my phone back into my pocket, already organizing the facts in my head the way I'd been trained to do under pressure. Whatever this was, it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't impulsive. It was planned. I set the folder down on the dining table and didn't sit right away, letting the weight of it speak first. Elena watched me from the kitchen doorway, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. The house was quiet in the way it only gets after midnight, when everything that's been cleaned starts to feel exposed again. These are copies, I said, sliding the folder open. She didn't bother hiding them well. I'd pulled them from Rachel's desk drawer before the officers arrived. Not the obvious files on top, but the ones tucked underneath printed contracts, draft agreements, handwritten notes in the margins. Rachel trusted paper more than servers. She liked things she could control. Elena stepped closer. What are they? Deals, I said. And contingencies. I scanned the first page, my eyes going straight to the sections that mattered. Years of logistics work had trained me to look for failure points. The places where a system assumes someone will be absent. This one, I said, tapping a paragraph. Change of control clause. Elena frowned. What does it mean? It means if something happens to me, I said, she gets everything. Her breath caught. Everything. The voting shares, I replied. The final approval authority. The power to sign without delay. I flipped to the next document. Another deal. Same language, slightly adjusted. Same assumption baked in. Rachel hadn't been improvising. She'd been preparing. She told your father you didn't care about the company, Elena said quietly. That the Navy had replaced it. I smiled once without humor. She told him I was unreliable. That you were sick, Elena added. There it was. The words sat between us, suddenly concrete instead of abstract. She needed me out of the way, I said. Not dead. Not at first. Just diminished. Elena swallowed. So people would stop listening to you. So I'd stop showing up, I said. So doctors would start writing things down. Fatigue, brain fog, stress-related impairment. I pulled another document from the folder. This one had Rachel's handwriting all over it. Notes about timelines, about travel schedules, about when my presence would be required for signatures. She timed my visits, I said. She knew when I'd be home. She knew when it mattered. Elena nodded slowly. She asked me for your schedule once. Did you give it to her? Yes, Elena said. I thought she wanted to plan dinners. I didn't blame her. Rachel had always been good at framing control as care. I leaned back against the table and let the picture finish forming. The slow symptoms, the careful dosing, the contracts waiting in the background. It wasn't about hurting me. It was about replacing me. My phone vibrated. A secure message from base. I stepped away from the table to read it. Preliminary talk screen positive. Heavy metal exposure suspected. Full report pending. I closed my eyes briefly, not in relief, but in confirmation. When I walked back, Elena was still standing exactly where I'd left her. They found it, I said. She exhaled long and shaky. Oh, it's real. It was always real, I replied. We just have proof now. She hesitated. What happens to the company? That depends, I said. On how deep this goes. I sat down finally and pulled my laptop from my bag. I hadn't brought it for work, but habits die hard. I logged into the company's shared financial portal, using credentials my father had insisted I keep. Transactions loaded slowly, then patterns. Transfers between accounts that didn't need them. Payments authorized early. Fees that didn't align with services rendered. Rachel's fingerprints were everywhere, but she'd been careful. Nothing illegal on its own. Just arranged. She was clearing the path, I said. Making sure everything moved fast once I stopped being a problem. Elena sank into a chair. She always said she was protecting your father. She was protecting leverage, I replied. I highlighted a row on the screen. See this? That's a consulting payment. Shell company. She owns it through a trust. Elena stared. That's stealing. It's pre-stealing, I said. The kind that assumes no one will be well enough to complain. I closed the laptop and leaned back, feeling the faint pressure behind my eyes again. It wasn't worse. Just present. A reminder that time mattered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. Where are you? He asked. At the house, I said. There was a pause. Rachel said you left without saying anything. I did, I replied. We'll talk tomorrow. Another pause. The doctor said it might be poisoning. They did. You don't think? I do, I said gently. And I have documents. Silence stretched long enough that I could hear his breathing. Come by in the morning, he said finally. Bring everything. I will, I replied. When the call ended, Elena looked at me. He won't want to believe it. I know, I said. He doesn't have to. The paperwork will. She nodded slowly, then stood and walked to the window, peering out at the quiet street. I've worked for your family a long time, she said. I thought loyalty meant silence. Sometimes it means notes, I replied. She smiled faintly at that. I gathered the documents into a neat stack, photographing each one, tagging them, backing them up. I didn't rush. Rushing leads to mistakes. Rachel hadn't rushed for months. I wasn't about to start now. Outside, a car passed headlights sweeping briefly across the walls. For a moment, I wondered where Rachel was. Probably on the phone, probably confident she still had room to maneuver. She didn't know about the clauses I'd just read, or the transactions I'd just flagged, or the fact that the narrative she'd built depended entirely on my silence. I closed the folder and slid it into my bag. Elena watched me. "Are you scared?" I considered the question honestly. "No," I said, "I'm clear." She nodded as if that was the answer she'd been waiting for. I turned off the kitchen light and headed for the door. Documents, secured facts, aligned, the shape of the problem, finally visible from every angle. Rachel hadn't been trying to hurt me. She'd been trying to erase me. And now that I could see it, I wasn't going to make it easy for her to finish the job. My phone started vibrating before I made it halfway to the car. Not a call, a notification, then another and another. I unlocked the screen and felt the temperature drop in my chest. An email from Base Legal. A flagged report. My name in the subject line. Allegation of misconduct. Abuse of authority. Intimidation of a civilian witness. Rachel didn't wait. By the time I reached the driver's seat, she had already fired the first shot. I didn't call her. I didn't text back. I sat in the car with the engine off and read every line twice, slow and deliberate. The language was careful, neutral, designed to sound routine. That was how you knew it wasn't. She'd framed it cleanly, claimed I'd used my military position to pressure Elena, claimed I'd interfered with a medical process, claimed I'd removed documents from the house without permission. None of it was dramatic. All of it was dangerous. I turned the key and drove. By the time I reached my hotel, the situation had already moved out of the family lane and into institutional territory. That was Rachel's strength. She didn't fight emotionally. She fought procedurally. I dropped my bag and opened my laptop setting, everything out the way I would before an inspection. Timeline, documents, photos, messages, nothing out of order, nothing deleted. My phone rang, Base Legal this time. Captain Brooks, the attorney, said. "We received a complaint." "I assumed you would," I replied. He paused. "You're not surprised." "No," I said, "I'm prepared." That earned another pause. "You're being accused of leveraging your rank in a personal dispute," he continued. "That's serious." "So is attempted poisoning," I said. "Which is why I documented everything." He didn't interrupt. "I didn't issue orders," I said. "I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't identify myself as acting on behalf of the Navy. I asked a witness to tell the truth. That's it." "And the documents you removed?" he asked. "Copies," I replied. "Photographed in place, chain of custody intact." Silence again. "Then send everything." "I already am," I said. When the call ended, I didn't feel relieved. I felt steady. Rachel had escalated exactly the way I expected her to. She wanted to flip the narrative before the fact is finished forming. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. "What did you do?" he asked. "I protected myself," I said. "She says you threatened Elena." "I didn't," I replied. "She's lying." He exhaled sharply. "You can't drag the Navy into this." "I didn't," I said. "She did." Another silence. He sounded older now, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the long night. "She says you're unstable," he said, "that you've been sick for months." "That part's true," I replied. "The reason isn't." He didn't respond right away. "I have proof," I added. "Not theories. Documents, medical data, financial records." "And Elena?" he asked quietly. "Elena told the truth," I said. "That's all." When the call ended, I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the blank wall across from the bed. Rachel had always known how to press where it hurt. She didn't need to disprove the poisoning. She just needed to make me look unreliable. I showered, changed, and laid everything out again this time, assuming hostile review. Every photo tagged, every message time-stamped, every interaction written as if I'd have to defend it under oath. At 6:12 a.m., my phone rang again. "Elena." "She came to the house," Elena said, breathless, "with a lawyer." "Did you talk to them?" I asked. "No," she said. "I told them I'd already spoken to the police." "Good," I replied. "Did she say anything else?" "She said you were trying to ruin her," Elena said. "That you'd always been jealous." I almost laughed. "Did you believe her?" I asked. "No," Elena said. She was too calm. "That mattered." "Listen to me," I said. "If anyone asks you questions, you answer exactly what you saw, nothing more." "I will," Elena said. "But she told me I could lose my job." "I know," I replied. "That's not how this ends." When the call disconnected, I sent a secure message to base requesting a formal ethics review. Voluntary, proactive, no ambiguity. If Rachel wanted a legal war, she was going to fight it in the open. By mid-morning, the police followed up with a request for additional documentation. By noon, a forensic accountant was looped in. Quietly, efficiently. The way real investigations move when they're no longer speculative. Rachel called once. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. "You think you're smarter than me?" she said. "You always have. But you don't understand how this works. People will believe me. They always do." I deleted it without saving. In the afternoon, base legal called again. "The complaint against you is being reviewed," the attorney said. "Given the circumstances, it's unlikely to proceed." Because I asked. "Because the evidence supports your actions," he replied. "And because the person who filed it appears to have significant conflicts of interest." I thanked him and ended the call. Outside my window, the city moved on. People walked dogs. Traffic crawled. Life didn't pause for family implosions or legal maneuvers. I packed my bag, careful not to rush, and checked out of the hotel. As I stepped into the parking lot, my phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed out of this." I didn't respond. Rachel had tried to turn the system against me. She'd assumed authority worked the way it always had in our family. Quiet pressure, selective truth. The right story told to the right people. She'd forgotten something important. Systems don't care about stories. They care about records. And she'd left too many behind. I plugged the drive into my laptop and watched the folder populate line by line. Elena stood behind me, close enough that I could feel her presence without turning around. The house was quiet again, not the cleaned-up quiet from before, but the kind that comes after people stop pretending everything is fine. "These are from the security system," she said. She never turned the audio off. That was the first real mistake Rachel had made. I clicked on the earliest file and scrubbed through until the timestamp matched one of my visits. The video showed the kitchen from a wide angle. Counters, sink, drawer by the window. No drama, just routine. Then Rachel entered the frame. She set her bag down, opened the drawer, and pulled out the small glass vial. Her movements were casual, unhurried. She tipped the bottle, counting under her breath. 1, 2. She capped it, slid the vial back into place, and stirred my coffee. The sound wasn't clear enough to catch every word, but it didn't need to be. The counting said enough. Elena inhaled sharply behind me. "That's the first time I ever heard it recorded," she said. I didn't answer. I moved to the next file. Another visit. Another drink. Same routine. Counted drops. Same vial. By the third clip, the pattern was undeniable. I paused the video and leaned back, rubbing my eyes, once careful not to let the moment turn into something emotional. This wasn't about how it felt, it was about what it proved. "Did she know the system recorded audio?" I asked. Elena shook her head. "She thought it was just video. Your father never wanted microphones." "That explains the confidence," I said. I opened the most recent file. The night of the party. Rachel appeared again, moving faster this time. She poured the wine without pausing, without counting. She glanced toward the hallway, distracted, then set the glass on the counter. The spill happened off camera, but the aftermath didn't. Rachel wiped the counter, irritated, then poured again. A heavier pour. No counting. She didn't raise the glass to her lips. Instead, she set it down and walked away. Elena's voice trembled. That's when I knew. I saved the clips, backing them up to a secure folder. Then another. Then another. Redundancy matters when the stakes are high. My phone buzzed. A message from the detective assigned to the case. "Do you have anything new?" I attached the files and typed one sentence. "Yes. Audio and video. Clear pattern." The reply came faster than expected. "Send everything, now!" I didn't hesitate. Elena sat down heavily at the table. "She always talked about being careful," she said. "About not leaving traces." "She was careful," I replied. "Just not about the right things." My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "This is Detective Harris," the voice said. "We received the files." And I asked. "And they're significant," he replied. "We're bringing them to the DA." I closed my eyes briefly. Not in relief, in acknowledgement. "Do you need Elena?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "But she's protected." I relayed that. Elena nodded, gripping the edge of the table like she needed something solid. A knock sounded at the door. I didn't jump. I already knew who it was. Rachel stood on the porch, expression, composed hair pulled back, phone in hand. She looked like she'd stepped out of a meeting, not into a confrontation. "You didn't answer my calls," she said. "You filed a complaint against me," I replied. "That changes the tone." She smiled thinly. "You forced my hand." I didn't step aside, but I didn't block her either. She walked in eyes, scanning the room, landing briefly on the laptop. "Elena," she said. "We need to talk." "No," Elena replied. "We don't." Rachel's gaze flicked to her sharp. "You don't know what you're doing." "I do," Elena said. "I'm telling the truth." Rachel laughed softly. "You think that protects you?" "It does," I said. "When it's recorded." Her head snapped toward me. "What did you say?" I tilted the laptop slightly so she could see the paused frame. Her own image stared back at her hand, hovering over the vial. For the first time, something cracked. She didn't yell. She didn't deny it. She went very still. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "I was managing a situation. You were poisoning me," I replied. She exhaled slowly. "You were never supposed to drink enough for it to matter." "That's not better," Elena said. Rachel ignored her. "You didn't belong here anymore," she said to me. "You show up, you question things, you make him doubt me." "I'm his daughter," I said. "So are you." "That's the problem," she replied. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, then at me again. "You think this ends well for you?" "I think it ends accurately," I said. She scoffed. "You'll drag the family through hell." "I didn't start this," I replied. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned toward the door. "This isn't over," she said. I didn't stop her. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Elena let out a breath she'd been holding for months. She admitted it. "Not enough," I said, "but close." My phone rang again. Detective Harris. "We've obtained a warrant," he said. "We're moving forward." "Understood," I replied. I looked at the laptop one last time at the frozen image of my sister mid-action counting drops she thought no one would ever hear. She'd believed control meant silence. She'd never considered the possibility that the quietest room in the house was listening the whole time. I shut the laptop and slid it into my bag. The evidence secured the picture finally complete enough to stand on its own. Nothing else needed to be said for the facts to keep moving. I sat with my hands folded on the table, not because I needed to steady them, but because I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of reading into my posture. The hearing room was smaller than people imagine. No drama, no raised voices. Just a long table, a few microphones, and the kind of silence that comes from everyone knowing the stakes are already set. Rachel sat across from me, perfectly composed. Dark blazer, neutral expression. The version of her that had always worked in boardrooms and family meetings alike. If someone walked in cold, they'd assume she was the reasonable one. The panel entered without ceremony. 3 members, all business. The chair opened the session. "We're here to review evidence related to alleged criminal conduct and associated complaints." No one used the word poisoning out loud yet. The prosecutor started with the medical findings. Charts on a screen, timelines. Elevated levels consistent with chronic exposure. Expert testimony from a toxicologist who spoke calmly without drama about what low-dose arsenic does to the body over time. "Symptoms can be subtle," she said. "Fatigue, cognitive impairment, easily misattributed to stress." I didn't look at Rachel. I didn't need to. The defense tried to frame it as coincidence. Environmental exposure, old pipes, bad luck. The toxicologist didn't blink. The pattern doesn't support that. Next came the financial evidence. A forensic accountant walked through transactions Rachel had approved. Consulting fees, shell entities, contingency clauses triggered by incapacity. This clause, he said, pointing to the screen transfers full authority in the event the other party is deemed unfit to participate. "Unfit," how one panel member asked. "Medically," the accountant replied, "or otherwise incapacitated." Rachel shifted for the first time. Her attorney objected. "This is speculative." "It's documented," the accountant said, and signed. They moved on to the security footage. The room changed when the audio played. Rachel's voice came through the speakers clear and unmistakable. 1, 2, a pause. The panel leaned forward almost in unison. The video showed her hand tipping the vial, counting under her breath, stirring the cup with practiced ease. Her attorney stood abruptly. "We object to." The chair raised a hand, overruled. The footage continued. Another day, another drink, Same routine. Rachel's face stayed still, but the tension in her jaw told a different story. When the final clip played the night of the party, the contrast was obvious. No counting. A heavier pour. The glass set aside untouched. The prosecutor didn't rush the moment. Is there any explanation for this behavior? Rachel's attorney stood. My client was under stress. The recordings are taken out of context. The panel chair looked at Rachel directly. Would you like to provide context? Rachel stood slowly. I was trying to help my sister, she said. She was unwell. I was managing a difficult situation. By administering a substance without her knowledge, the chair asked. Rachel hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Enough. I never intended to harm her, she said. I was controlling dosage. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. I felt Elena's breath catch beside me. The chair nodded once. Thank you. Rachel's attorney sat down without meeting her eyes. The panel called Elena next. She took the oath with steady hands and told the truth the same way she'd written it down, dates, actions, observations. No embellishment. No anger. Why did you keep notes? The prosecutor asked. Because I was scared, Elena replied. And because I didn't think anyone would believe me without them. The panel listened. Then it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I answered questions. Explained symptoms. Explained procedures. Explained why I documented everything instead of confronting anyone directly. I didn't want to be wrong, I said. And I didn't want to be emotional. The chair nodded. You're in the military. Yes. You're trained to document, he said. Yes. Rachel's attorney tried one last angle. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted your sister's actions? I met his eyes, not after the recordings. That was the end of it. The panel recessed. No one spoke. Rachel stared at the table. Her confidence had evaporated, replaced by calculation again, but it was too late. The math no longer worked. When the panel returned, the chair didn't waste time. Based on the evidence presented, he said we find that Ms. Rachel Brooks engaged in deliberate premeditated conduct, resulting in criminal harm. Rachel closed her eyes. We further find that the complaint filed against Captain Brooks was retaliatory and without merit. I didn't react. I'd learned a long time ago not to celebrate outcomes until the system finished moving. The chair continued. This matter will be referred for prosecution. Appropriate actions regarding financial oversight will proceed immediately. Rachel's attorney whispered something urgently in her ear. She didn't respond. As the room began to shift, papers gathering, chairs moving, Rachel looked up at me for the first time since the recordings played. This didn't have to happen, she said quietly. I stood. It already did. She searched my face for something. Sympathy, regret, anything that could soften the moment. She didn't find it. Elena exhaled slowly, like someone who'd been holding a breath for years. Outside the room, my phone buzzed. A message from Base Legal confirming the dismissal of the complaint against me. Another from my unit commander, proud of how you handled yourself. I slid the phone back into my pocket without answering either. Rachel was escorted down the hall by an officer. Not in handcuffs, not yet. Just guided her steps, measured her head high. My father stood alone near the wall, staring after her. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. I didn't wait for him to say anything. I walked out into the daylight, the air sharp and clean, and felt the weight shift in a way that wasn't relief or victory. It was finality. The truth didn't need me anymore. It could stand on its own. I didn't look back when I stepped outside the building. The doors closed behind me with a soft, mechanical sound, the kind designed to be forgettable. The air felt colder than it had that morning, or maybe I just noticed it more. I stood on the steps for a moment, letting my body catch up to what my mind had already accepted. The hearing was over. The system had taken control. There was nothing left for me to argue. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Captain Brooks, my commander said. Just wanted to hear it from you. It went the way it needed to, I replied. He paused. You're cleared. No restrictions. Take the rest of the day. I'll be back tomorrow, I said. A faint chuckle. Of course you will. The call ended, and with it, the last thread tying the day to anything unfinished. Elena was waiting by the car, hands clasped tight around her bag. She looked smaller out here, away from courtrooms and hallways, like the adrenaline had finally worn off. It's done, she said. Yes, I replied. It is. She hesitated. What happens to me? You already spoke to the detective, I said. Witness protection isn't dramatic. It's paperwork. They'll help you relocate if you want. She nodded. I want. I figured, I said. We drove in silence. Not heavy silence, just neutral. The kind that doesn't demand conversation. At the house, Elena went straight to her room to pack. I stood in the kitchen looking at the counter where the wine glass had once sat. No stain, no mark. Nothing to indicate how close everything had come to a different outcome. My father came in quietly, like he wasn't sure he was welcome. She's being charged, he said. I know. He rubbed his hands together, then stopped. I should have seen it. Maybe I said, but you didn't. He looked up at me. Can you forgive me? I thought about it honestly. About the months I'd been sick. About the way he'd deferred to Rachel because it was easier. About the cost of that convenience. I'm not here to punish you, I said. But things will change. He nodded slowly. I understand. I'll be stepping away from the company, I added. Permanently. He flinched. You don't have to. I do, I said. This ends cleanly or it doesn't end at all. He swallowed. Then I'll respect that. That was as close to an apology as he could manage. It was enough. Elena returned with 2 suitcases and a small box. She set them by the door and looked around the room one last time. I never thought I'd leave like this, she said. You're not leaving empty-handed, I replied. You told the truth. She smiled, tentative but real. Thank you for believing me. I nodded. Thank you for paying attention. We drove her to a temporary hotel arranged by the detective's office. No goodbyes that felt final. Just a handshake that turned into a brief hug, awkward and sincere. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, I replied. That night I slept for the first time in months without waking up nauseous or disoriented. No dreams, just rest. The next morning, I put on my uniform and drove back to base. The gate guard scanned my ID and waved me through like nothing had happened. In a way, that was the point. At my desk, the work waited exactly where I'd left it. No one asked questions they didn't need to. The Navy has a way of acknowledging storms without making them everyone's business. During lunch, I checked my phone. A message from the detective confirming Rachel had been formally charged. Another from a number I didn't recognize. You think this makes you better than me? I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back a single line. It makes me alive. I blocked the number and put the phone away. Weeks passed. My symptoms faded gradually, not dramatically. The fog lifted. The nausea stopped. My focus returned in small, measurable increments. Medical reports confirmed what the recordings already had. At one point, I was asked if I wanted to make a statement, a press comment, something for closure. I declined. Revenge doesn't need an audience. One afternoon, I stood on the deck overlooking the water, watching a team run drills below. The rhythm was familiar, controlled, predictable. Someone beside me asked, "You ever think about what could have happened?" "Yes," I said. "I just don't live there." That was the difference. Rachel had believed control meant silence, meant weakening someone until they disappeared quietly. She'd underestimated the one thing she never valued: documentation, boundaries, and the kind of patience that comes from knowing you don't have to win loudly to win at all. I walked back inside, logged into my system, and picked up exactly where I'd left off. The most dangerous battlefield I'd ever entered wasn't overseas. It wasn't marked on any map. It was a family living room, a kitchen counter, a glass of wine handed over with a smile. And the only reason I walked away from it was because someone noticed something small, said something quiet, and I chose not to ignore it. That was the win. Nothing more was needed. If stories like this matter to you, real family revenge stories, military lives behind the uniform, and the kind of truth that doesn't need to be loud, subscribe to the channel. These stories aren't about winning. They're about surviving, setting boundaries, and walking away intact. Walking away intact. Walking away intact. Walking away intact. Walking away intact.